Hi, and welcome back to a um, to part two in my uh, Basics of Unreal Engine Modding tutorial series. Now, in today's episode, we are going to go through 6 different steps to get you to making your first uh, mod. So, the 6 steps that we will go through today are as follows. Step 1 is getting the AES encryption/decryption key. Step 2 is how to use UModel. Step 3 is I will explain to you virtual paths versus folder paths in Unreal Engine and how they differ and how they are the same. Um, Step 4 is I will explain a little bit about file types and how to find file types with UModel. Step 5 is where I do the demonstration. I'm going to do this demonstration with the game session. I'm going to replace a material and yeah, so I'm going to replace a material and show you that step by step. And then step 6 is really just the conclusion, where I go through reiterate basically the basics of how it all works. Right, so let's get on to step 1. Now, step 1 is getting the AES encryption key. Now, if you have Unreal Engine, if you have Unreal Mod Unlocker, which is my tool, if you have that installed to your game and it's configured, and if you have Unreal Mod Unlocker Pro or Pro Early Access, what you can do is you can go to the Unreal Mod Unlocker settings, and I will drag the settings over here from the other screen, and you can turn this setting on. It's going to be false by default, but you can turn that to true. And this will let us dump the AES key. Now, when you have turned that to true and you saved the document, the settings, all you have to do is start up the game and close it immediately. You don't have to close it, but go ahead and close it. Then inside of Unreal Mod Unlocker logs, you will have this file, AES at the end here, log AES. So you want to open that up. I'm going to drag it over once again because they keep opening in my other window. And in here, you will see there will be the AES key for the pack file. Right. And this is how you get the AES key. It's very simple. Now that we have the AES key, we are going to go to step 2 of this tutorial, which is how to use UModel. Right. Now, I'm just going to minimize this real quickly. And we are going to go over to our UModel folder, and we're going to start UModel with this executable, the 64-bit executable. Then what we will need is the path to our game files. And that path is going to be, so if you go to the root of your Unreal Engine game, you go to the project name folder right here, which is session game for this project, or this game. Then you go to content, packs, and then you have a pack file right here. That is an archive with all of our files. You need to copy this path. You need to then go back to UE Viewer or UModel, and you need to click these 3 dots, this button, paste it at the top here and hit enter. Now you're entered into that folder. You click select folder, you hit OK, and now you're going to get this pop-up. UE Viewer has found an encrypted UE4 pack file. In order to work correctly, please specify an AES encryption key, which is used for this game. Okay, so let's specify that key. So let's go up here and let's go to the document, the log here with the AES key. Let's copy the whole thing, including the 0x at the beginning, and let's hit OK. And here we are. We are entered into the pack file. Now we can close all these file folders, collapse them, and so using UModel is kind of simple. When you use UModel, all you really do is you find the file you want. Let's find any file here. And all you do is you find the file, and so let's find a material like this. Ribsman costume. You double click it, and it's going to ask you, UE Viewer has found an unversioned UE4 package. Now, that's because I didn't specify the version when I loaded this archive. Now, I could have done that, and then we wouldn't get these prompts, but I didn't, so let's just select the version that our game uses. If you don't know which version that is, all you have to do is go to Binaries, Win64, and then right-click the game's shipping executable, go to Properties, Details, and then right here under File Version, you will see the version. What you need is the first two version numbers, which is the major and the minor version number. So 4.27. You hit OK, and here we are. Here we have the material with its loaded textures. Okay, so now if you can't, by the way, if you cannot find the version number in here, it doesn't always show up in here. If you can't find it, what you can do is, once again, you can, if you have Unreal Mod Unlocker Pro, if you have the early access version, what you can do is you can go into settings and turn UE version logs to true, and that's only for early access members. What you can do then is when you start the game and close it, you'll get a log file with the version, which will look like this, which tells you which version it is. So that's another way you can get the version. Okay, now that we know that, let's go back to UModel. Right. So when we open an asset like this, you may wonder, how do I get back to the other menu? Where is the file menu? What you need to do is click File, Open Package, and this is how you get back to it. Right. So when you have found a file that you want to modify, so I want to modify this material, and when you modify a material, you are not actually you're not modifying anything. Really, you are making a new asset. So you can edit, you can export and edit a texture or whatever, but the best way to go about it is always to be creative and make your own asset from scratch. So that's what we're going to do with this material. So to do that, we will need a few things. And by the way, let me just show you how to export a file and get what we need, the paths we will need in the next step from UModel here. So when you found the file you want to mod, you go here and you click Save Packages, hit OK, and that's it. Now if you go back into UModel, you will have a UModel saved folder, which it will contain the material that we exported. Right. And this material is not a material that we can open with Unreal Engine. We can't use this for anything really. The only thing we will use this for is getting paths. And here's where we get to step number 3. So in step 3, I will explain virtual paths versus folder paths. Okay, so in Unreal Engine, right? So let's start by explaining it like this. Let's close this up and let's go in here. So in a pack, we have a base mounting point slash base path in the pack, which contains usually engine, plugins, and session game. Okay, so what these represent is folders that would otherwise go into the root folder of our game. So as you can see in the root folder, we have session game, which we have right here as well. We have plugins, which we don't have here, but that would go in here if we were to unpack all these files. Then we have game, which I'll talk about a little bit later in a second. But then we have engine, right? Engine is also this folder, engine. So the files that are missing from this engine folder in our game, they will be inside of this pack engine folder. Okay, so the last thing is game. And what is game? Well, game is a mounting point that represents, so if we go back to the root folder, you might think, oh, game might represent session game. But it does not represent session game. Game represents content. So game and content is the exact same folder. So let me show you a picture. So this picture explains it. Here we have a file that's inside of a pack file. And inside of a pack file, a file will have this path. Game, character, uniques, ribsman, textures, and then we have the file name. When that file is unpacked and it's not loaded through a pack, it would look like this. Content, and then, character, uniques, ribsman, textures, and the file name. Right. So basically, what happens here is that game is a virtual path that represents content. Game is a path that only exists inside of packs, and it represents content. Okay. So when we unpack a file package to a UAsset and we want to run that file, what we do is we basically go from here, right? We split right here and we take this folder with these files and we move this into content right here to create this. That is how the Unreal Mod Unlocker works. So a file that, well, actually, that is just how it works when you unpack and you put that file into the correct place. Now, how the Unreal Mod Unlocker works is this. The functionality of the Unreal Mod Unlocker is if a file exists inside the pack, we can replace it with the one we ourselves created, or in this case here, I'm demonstrating here with just unpacking a file. As long as it has the same name, engine version, I forgot to type that, the same type, and it's inside the same folder structure as the original file, the one that's located inside the pack file, then, it will load it. So just remember that the folder game is a virtual folder and that the folder content replaces it when files are loaded outside of the pack file. And another point is that you do not have to export a file with UModel and edit that file to make a mod. You can make a completely new file in Unreal Engine 4. You can load that instead of the original file that you are replacing. Just make sure it is of the same type. Okay, here are some types. So now Now that I've explained this, how paths work, I'm going to just demonstrate quickly. So now that we unpacked I'm going to go back to the same folder. Now that we unpacked this material from before, how would we load that in our game? Well, in UModel saved, we'll have game, which is really just content. You can think of it like that. You can even rename it, but let's not for now. When you have this game folder, the next folder inside of it is where the path starts, right? So what you want to do is you just want to drag this into content, and then we have the proper path. Content, character, uniques, ribs, man, materials, and the same file name. As you can see here, it's the same paths. Game and content is the same, of course, character, and all of it. It's all the same. So now if I boot the game up, we won't notice a difference. We won't see any change because we just unpacked the file. Well, let's make a change. So how do we do that? How do you edit a material, right? How would I do that? Well, let's make a material. So now that we know the path, now that we have the path starting from game, which is content, all we have to do, it's very simple. All we have to do now is recreate this path and this file name for a material inside of the Unreal Engine editor. Okay. So basically, yeah, I guess this step is kind of over. So let's go to step number 4, which is the file types. So step number 4 is different file types. So what file types are there? Well, in our case, it's a material. Okay. So if you want to find something with UModel and you don't know what type it is, usually you can use the game developer's naming convention, like materials and textures, scale meshes, but not all of them use the same naming conventions. They don't all use the same type of paths. So what you can do is you can go to Flat View. You can click here on the arrow at Tools and Scan Content. What that will do is it will scan all this content for the type that it is. So you can sort by texture, for instance, and you can go down here and all of these with a number in front of them, all of these are textures. And then if you sort by animation or stat, which is static mesh, and scale, that's skeletal mesh. That is one way to figure out a type. Now, after you get a little bit used to Unreal Engine, you can kind of tell what type it is just by looking at files, names and files. But that is the different file types. And so when you make a file in Unreal Engine, make sure that you know what type it is first, and make sure that you make the same type. So let's go on to step 5, which is the demonstration. Okay, so in Unreal Engine, let's create the same file path to the file that we want to mod. Well, before we do that, there's a few settings you might want to set, which is if you go to Settings and Packaging, set your build configuration to shipping, and that's about it. Do that and hit save, and you're done. Now, there's one more setting you might want to use for loading materials, but I will get to that in a little bit. And, well, actually, I'll show you right away. So what you can do, some materials will not load unless you use the same project settings for this one specific setting. So what that is this setting. You can go up here and search for share. Now, the setting is called Share Material Shader Code. It's on by default. Session, the game that I'm doing this demonstration on, is using false as the default option. The default option right now is true when you start a fresh project. So most games will have this set to true, but you might have to set it to false or true depending on what matches your game's project. So you're gonna have to fiddle with that, see what works. Now that we know that, let's create our first mod. Okay, so let's create the folder structure. We have the folder. Let's go to, so UModel saved. Now this is the whole folder structure. It's character, uniques, ribsman, and materials. And those exist inside of game, which we know as content. So when we are in here, right? When we are in here in the game folder, we're really inside of the content folder. And if you look here, that is also the root folder that you work in inside of the Unreal Engine editor. So what you can do is you can just copy this path one folder at a time, like this, and create one folder at a time. And let's see. So we will create character. Let's create uniques. And let's go back. Let's create ribsman, like this. And let's go into ribsman, and here we have materials. So let's create the materials folder inside of ribsman, of course. And then let's see, is there any more folders? No, that's it. Then what you need to do is you need to copy the file name without the file extension, of course. So just the file name. And then you want to create a file of the same file type. So what we are trying to mod now is a material. Now, there are many different types in Unreal Engine, of course. There are in here, there's just a lot of different types. Here's the material, here's the shortcut. But, if you're trying to mod a blueprint class or a blueprint function library or a structure, all these things you can mod. You just need to recreate them in here. But in our case, we're doing it with a simple thing, which is a material. So let's create a material. Let's now copy paste the name of our material, the one in here, to our material. Okay. So our material, because our material is on a skeletal mesh, which is a character mesh that moves, you will need a setting. You'll need to set a setting inside of the materials editor, which you get into by double-clicking the material. You will need to set a setting in here called use with scale meshes. So all you need to do here is you search for scale, used with a skeletal mesh. Hit OK. Hit apply, and hit save. Now, to get this material to have something of substance to show in the game, what we can do is we can create I think they're called a vector. Well, actually, let's just do they're called a constant. Let's create a constant 3 vector. There we are. What we can do also is convert it to a parameter, which is what I like to do because I want to use these with instances, and you need parameters with instances. You can't use the constants. So what you can call this is color parameter, and then in the color parameter, you can do something like multiply. And you can multiply this color parameter with a scalar parameter called emission multiplier. I think that's how you call it. Or is it plier? No, that's how you do it with the pliers to the tool. Okay, So when you have this connected up, but what you basically have here is if we just apply and we click this X and we go to this color, what you can do is you can set a value. So let's set 1 here. And that gives us a fully red color. What this value does is this multiplies this color value by this multiplier. So if we put that into the emissive color and we set the default value to 1, we're going to get a slightly emissive red color. Now if we set this to 2 or 20, you're going to get more and more emission coming off of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to like 10, like this. I'm going to hit apply, and now we have a very, very basic emissive material. Okay, so now that we have all of this set up, we have our material set up, we have the material set up to work with skeletal meshes, and we have, it's all set up basically. What we can do with materials is quite interesting. So when you replace a material, you can actually replace a material with a material instance. Yeah. So you don't have to replace materials with other materials. You can replace them with a material instance. So what we can call this is actual material, like that. And then we right-click our actual material and we create an instance. And what we want to do is the material that we are replacing, we want to just remove everything until it matches. So boom, here we go. Matte AMXX Ribsman costume. So now what we are doing is we are actually replacing a material with a material instance. And then our material instance will use our own material that we can call anything we want. Anything. We can call this hello. We can call it anything. But what we're doing is we're replacing a material with a material instance. And I like to do that because it gives us more options with how we can use that, what we can do with that material. So a few things we can do with a material instance, for instance, is we can double click it and we can go in here, and from here we can do this. We can very quickly, without recompiling the material, we can change the properties inside of this instance. So let's change them to 20 instead of 10 to get a little bit more emission. Okay, we can even change the color, so we can change this to a blue color or a purple color like this. So let's do that and let's see if this works. So now that we've changed up the material instance of this material, what we want to do is we just want to cook this. All right, so now that we are cooking that, let's go back to our games content folder. Let's get rid of this character folder here. Don't even know why I have it there. And then let's go to our Unreal Engine projects, which you can find in Documents, Unreal Projects. Then you find the project name for whatever game you're modding. So go watch the first tutorial on how to set this up. Then inside of here where you have the U project, you want to go to Saved, Cooked to get to the cooked files. Windows, no editor. You want to go to Session Game or whatever project name you have, Content, and then you want to copy the folder here of the mod you just made. So copy this whole folder, paste it in here so that we have the right path, right? So you can see if we go in here, we will have both files, both the actual material and the instance. Okay. And remember that the instance in this case replaces the actual material. So let us boot up the game and hope that it works. Now, in the past, this has worked for every other Unreal Engine version. So I would be surprised if it doesn't work, but you never know. And as you can see, it works. So what this shows us is that, well, I guess this is step 6. It's the conclusion of this whole thing. Is she doing that? What is she doing? She's pushing me along. What a nice lady. Well, now, what this shows us is basically how flexible Unreal Engine modding really is, right? If the file is of the same type, it has the same path and the same name, and it is cooked with the same engine version that has the same project settings for whatever file you're trying to mess with, the file will load successfully if you have the Unreal Mod Unlocker installed. That is how the Unreal Mod Unlocker works. It's that simple. If the file is of the same type, and a material instance and a material is it is the same type in a way. It's an instance of a material, and so it's the same type. So if it's the same type, it has the same path and name, and it is cooked with the same engine version, it will be loaded successfully. Now, another thing about this is hierarchy. File hierarchy. What rules over other files? Now, a material instance rules over a material because this instance uses this material that it links to, right? And so if I make an instance instead of a material, then my instance will load my material and not any other material in the game. It will load my material that I can call hello, right? And so the name of this will not exist anywhere else inside of the pack, which means that right now I have a file in the game that is not being replaced. This is a whole new file that's being added to the game. But I'm using this as a kind of a hook into the material and into the game. Now you can do the same thing with other objects. If you recreate a very simple blueprint, or you can even sometimes replace simple blueprints actors that don't do anything with your own, right? Then you have a direct access into using blueprints inside of the game by using something called reference modding. And that is referencing files by their file path and name. And we can do that. We can do that with Unreal Engine modding. So, but we will get to that in future tutorials. But once again, the conclusion is if it's a file of the same type, with the same name and path, and it's cooked with the same engine version, and you have made sure that the project settings are the same, and there aren't that many that affect files in this capacity where they just won't show. I showed you basically one of them. There's a handful of them. I showed you one of them today. If you have all of those things set up, your file will be loaded into the game if you have the Unreal Mod Unlocker installed. Okay, so that is all for today's video. This is basically what I explained yesterday and today about setting up the project, and today's, well, the whole demonstration I did here today. This is true for every single type of file in Unreal Engine. Every type. So when you understand how to replace these materials, when you understand how that works, try it with other file types and others and more, and keep doing it and see what kinds of different files you can replace and what you can do. Like, there's no limits. You can do this with any file that is loaded by the game. So if you understand how to do this one file type, the material, you understand how to do every single one of these file types. It's just that there's different settings, where there's different You have to reconstruct them differently. There are some small differences, but it's all basically the same. If you do it for something like a texture or audio, it's exactly the same. You just replace the file with any other music or picture file, and as long as it has the same path and all that, it's all going to load. Right. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching part 2. I will have part 3 ready in about 1 to 2 weeks, and that will be uploaded to my Patreon as well. So good luck everyone, and have fun modding. Peace.